This assignment is a profile assignment, and this is what's known as a written portrait. Basically, a written portrait would be where you take a person, a place, an event, or maybe some other things, and you present that subject in an interesting way or an entertaining way, and a way that shows its significance. A way that shows us shows something or someone in a way that we haven't seen it before, or in a way that we don't know we don't know much about that subject in this way. So, for example, you might see a profile of a celebrity in a magazine. You might read a blog about a travel destination or kind of an offbeat festival. On TV, you might see a profile of something like that. So a profile is going to shows us that subject in an entertaining way, but also an important way. Here are some key features when you're writing a profile. First of all, your profile should have an interesting subject. The subject might be something unusual, it might be something ordinary, but shown in an intriguing or different way. You might profile an interesting person, an interesting place, or an event. Another important feature of a profile is to provide any background information. A profile usually includes just enough information to let readers know something about the subject's larger context. So you want to make sure that the reader has enough information to understand the interesting angle that you have chosen, but doesn't necessarily include other details that don't really matter for this profile. Another key feature of a profile is to have a unique or an interesting angle. A good profile captures its subject from a particular angle. And sometimes finding an angle is very easy because the topic itself is unique enough to be interesting on its own. However, other topics might require you to find a particular aspect that you can focus on. For example, a profile of a person might focus on the important work the person does or a challenging hobby that person pursues, but it would likely ignore other aspects of the person's life that don't relate to that angle. So, for example, if you're talking about a person's challenging hobby, you probably wouldn't talk about what they do for work because it might not be relevant to the angle that you have chosen. Another important feature is that you have a first-hand account. Whether you're writing about a person, a place, or event, you need to spend some time observing and interacting with your subject. With a person, interacting might mean watching and conversing. If you're profiling a place, you might need to visit that place and make some observations. If you're profiling an event, then you might need to actually go and participate in that event. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a very active participant. You have to be engaged in it. Sometimes just being a silent observer can also help you to get information. And then finally, you need to include engaging details about your profile subject. So these might include specific information, sensory images, figurative language, dialogue, and anecdotes or short stories that show rather than tell your audience. You want your audience to see and to hear your subject rather than just reading kind of an abstract, distant description of it. So you're trying to give them an impression. You're trying to kind of paint a mental portrait for your reader. So details are very important. When you're choosing a subject, you want to make sure that you choose a suitable subject. So the person, the place, the thing, the event, the idea, whatever it is that you choose, make sure that it's something that really you're passionate about or you're very curious about. It shouldn't be something that you're too familiar with. Knowing your subject too well can actually blind you to interesting details. So it might be helpful to list many options before you decide on what subject you want to profile. Maybe list 5 to 10 interesting subjects before you decide on a subject. That way you have some choices, some options if what you choose doesn't end up working out. And then do some preliminary research. Make sure that this is something you can commit to. Make sure you actually are able to do firsthand research. Don't profile a person who can't or won't be interviewed. Don't profile a place or activity that you can't observe. Make sure that it's something that you can actually commit to. So, how do you come up with some ideas? Once you've chosen your subject, how do you generate ideas for writing an interesting profile? Well, think first about what do you already know? Why do you find this subject interesting? What do you know about it now? What do you expect to find out as you do some research about it? Do you have any preconceived ideas about your subject? Does it spark an emotional reaction in you as you think about your subject? Why do you have those reactions when you think about your subject? So those might be some ways to help you come up with some ideas for your profile. Visit your subject. If you're writing in about an amusement park, go there. If you're profiling a person, make an appointment to meet and interview that person. Get to know your subject. If you're writing about ice cream, sample the ice cream. Take photos or videos if you think that might help you to remember later on. But actually go and see your subject or talk to your subject. Do additional research. You might be writing a profile based entirely on your field of research, what career you want to pursue or what you're studying for your major. But you might be writing about something completely different. So do a little library or web research to deepen your understanding, get a new perspective on your subject, or maybe fill in some gaps. And then analyze what you find. Look for patterns, recurring ideas or phrases, some engaging details. Look for contrasts or discrepancies between a subject's words and actions, between the appearance of a place and what actually goes on there, between your own expectations and your research findings. And then come up with an angle. Do you see an angle? If you don't, try free writing. What was the most memorable thing about your subject? What most interests you? What do you think might most interest your audience? Sometimes you'll know your topic from the start, but sometimes you might not. Try other brainstorming activities like clustering or listing to help you get ideas as well. And then think about, are you actually able to develop your ideas? Does your angle have enough for you to write about? Are you going to be able to describe your subject, compare your subject with other subjects of a similar type? Are there enough engaging details that will bring your subject to life for your audience? And then can you create some kind of dominant impression with those details? There are a couple of ways that you can organize your profile. The first way that you can organize your profile is to write kind of a narrative style essay as your profile. In this type of organization, you'll first introduce your subject and your angle on it and provide any necessary background information. Then you're going to tell stories. Tell maybe about various incidents, characteristics. Tell about them one by one and bring your subject to life. And then conclude with an overall impression. State your overall impression, maybe with an anecdote, a quote, a summary comment, or some other ending that you think is appropriate. You can also organize your profile as a description style essay, where you're describing a person or a place. Again, introduce your subject and your angle on the subject and provide any necessary background information. Then present details that create some kind of dominant impression about your subject, sensory details, examples, dialogue, anecdotes, etc. And then finally conclude, again, similar to the first style of organization, conclude with an overall impression. State your overall impression, offer a final anecdote or quote, and finish a description that you maybe had begun earlier. Those are all some suggestions for how you could conclude that style of essay. And then as you are developing your topic and completing your profile, ask yourself some of these questions as you go. Is the topic too broad? Is it too specific? Do you approach the subject from a unique angle? What organizational structure would work best for the topic that you have selected, for the subject that you're going to profile? How can you develop these ideas into a complete essay? How can you explore the ideas from a pre-writing stage and take them to more detail? What additional research do you need to do to support this topic? What kind of research might enhance this idea? Those are all some things to keep in mind as you're working on this essay. That's all for this lecture. The information in this presentation was adapted from the Norton Field Guide to Writing 4th edition. If you do have any questions, please let me know.